Yeah, welcome to this session where we are going to be dealing with forms in HTML. Now, most of the time you need to get entries, values from the user, and to do that, we do that using form in HTML. And that is what we are going to be looking at in this session. We're going to be looking at some tags that allow us to take inputs using different formats from the user. And we have different types of format that you can use to take values from the user, and that range from you can take value as an input, you can take value as a select, whereby you allow the user to select from a particular predefined options. You can also take value from as radio, and that this radio is also like a checkbox that allow the user to select but just one value that can be selected. You can also take value as text area. Text area and inputs, they are almost the same thing, just that when you want to take more words, more length of words, then you use text area instead of the inputs. And you also have the checkbox. The checkbox and radio too, they are almost the same, just that checkbox you can select multiple values, while for radio you can only select one value, and so on and so forth. So we are going to be looking at all these inputs forms, inputs values in this section. So the first one, anytime you're dealing with forms in HTML, irrespective of the input field that you want to use or irrespective of the value that you want to take, you must wrap all these in a form tag. So it must be wrapped in a form tag. So anytime you want to take entries from the user, then you must wrap it around the form tag. And this form tag has different values. That maybe it has value of action, that's if the user submit the form, what action do you want to perform. Most of the time you perform this by maybe sending it to the server. Maybe you have a server side code, you can just put that server side code URL here, but you are not going to be doing that here. And you also have method. The method can either be a post or a get, and the most popular one is the post. So because you are taking entry from the user, then and then the user submits, then you post it to the server. And we also have encryption type. This encryption type is also like, okay, maybe you want to take only text, then you use text plain. But if you want to take maybe a file, then it's always advisable that you select this multi-path form data, because if you don't select it, it might not be saying that file. So that is the three most popular attributes of form. That now let's now go to the form elements. Now let me wrap it around div. I said when you want to wrap something around, when you want to put it in a container, then you can wrap it around div. First one is the label. The label is just give the user description of what they should enter in the input field. So let me say the label for name, and this label always take an attribute for 4, and the 4, let me use it for name. And if I come down here, I want to take the user's name, then the the form element that I'm going to be using to take the username is going to be input. So that is if I want to take a short text from the user, then I use input. Now this input, notice something that here I have attribute of for name. It's always advisable that I use ID of whatever name that I specify here, whatever value that I specify for 4 here, then I should use the value as the ID of the input field. So if I say name, and another attribute that this can take is type. So we have different type. It can be type of number, it can be type of text, depending on what you are expecting the user to enter. This can also be like data type of the input field. So type of name, number, email. But in this case, since we want user to enter their name, then it's going to be a type of text. So it's going to be a type of text. And so let's just save this and see it in action. So something the f- the functionality of specifying this for property and making that value to be the ID of this input field is that when the user come here and click on the label, it's going to make the input field to be active. But let's make the for to be maybe name 1 and the ID is name. It's not going to make the form field to be active when we click on the label. So you can see that I'm clicking on the label now and nothing is happening, because so it's always good that your for property and the ID of the input field should be the same thing. So Now you also have other property that you can, for better visibility, let me make this. Okay, now you also have other property you can specify for this, and that is you also can specify the name. So this name is always used at the when you post it to the server. So the name should be name, and you can also specify another property called placeholder. This placeholder is what the users see on the text on the input feed before they start entering any value. So the placeholder can be maybe enter your name, and if I save, you see the placeholder in action. Before I start clicking on anything on the input feed, the placeholder will be active. So if I press it, you can see that the placeholder is gone now. Now you also can specify other attributes like required. Maybe the user cannot submit the form until they fill something into the input feed, and you can also have autofocus too. Maybe once the page is loaded, you want the input feed to be active. So once the page is loaded, you want the input feed to be active. You can also make it to be autofocus. Let's remove the autofocus and let's see it in action. Okay, so autofocus is just make the user to just make it attract some attention. You can see it attracts a bit of attention from the user to the. You can also have autocomplete, like while the user is typing, maybe there are some values that have entered into the feed before, then you can have autocomplete to be on, so that as I'm typing, it can be helping me to, maybe I type my name, you can see that it's helping me to complete it based on the values that has been taken from me before. So you can also specify the the maximum length. There are a lot of property you can specify to make this input field to be unique. Maybe the maximum length you want to take is just 100, so the user will not be able to enter anything beyond 100. Let me just make it 2. So if I enter 2, that means I can only enter 2 characters. So if I enter AB, if I try to enter more words, it will definitely not accept it. So because the maximum length is specifiable, of course, we will not put any name to be maximum length of 2, because we have names that are more than that. So we can just make it to be possibly 100, possibly 100. And other input type can be, let me just duplicate this. Let me just duplicate this sheet turn arrow. So other input type, maybe you want to take the email, and just like this name, let me just change this can now be input for name, email, and the type will not be text again, because there's a specific type of format that email always take anytime we are taking email. So the type will be email. So the type will be, and if you want to see other types, you can just put your cursor here and press Ctrl space. It will bring all the different types of input element that you can take from the user. You can take input type of button, checkbox, color, date time lookup, email, file, hidden, image, month, number, password. This password is just as you are typing it, it will make it to not be visible. So for now we are dealing with email, and the name is going to be maybe email 2. This is always considered the server side or the backend side of the. So you can make the input a placeholder to be enter your email. If I save this now, and you can see now that I have my email. So let me just break this div using breakpoints. Let me just break this and save so that I have some space. So email, and enter your email. So maximum length, I can decide to remove it so that user can enter their email without any restriction. And autocomplete too, you can decide to put it on and off, and autofocus too, you can decide to remove this. And you can, if you want it to be required, that means you want the user to enter it, and without entrance you don't want them to be able to submit the form, then you should make it to be required. And another type that you can have is, I said we can have type of, okay, let me just use one type of inputs, and to just show you, now we also have type of number where you can only enter. So let me just call this others so that we see it in action while we try and also save time. So others, let me make this others. So where we see the other types of input type in action. Others, and the name cannot be others, so let me just call this other input types. Other input types can also be required. Now the another type I want us to look at is this number type. So where you only enter numbers, and if you come here, you can, if you try to press A, you try to press B, to not take it until you press 1 or 2 or 9, or as the case may be, any number you're trying to enter. You can see the this arrow up and arrow down. If you click on it, it's going to increase it, and if you click on the down arrow, it's going to decrease it. Now you see that it's decreasing by 1. Maybe you want it to decrease by 10, depending on what you're taking. You can just add the property called step. You can just add the property called step, and the step can be 10. So if you make it to be 10, every increment is going to be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and you can also decrease it to even be a decimal number. You can also decrease to even maybe 0.01. So when you are increasing, it's going to be increasing at that range depending on what you are taking. And you can also set the minimum value. Maybe the minimum value that you can take is 45. So if you start now and I pick from the lowest, start from 45 and let's go up from there. And you can also set the maximum. Maybe you are dealing with percentage. Maybe the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 100. Or maybe you are dealing with age and you don't want anybody that's less than 18 to be able to enter into the system. You can set the minimum to be 18 and the maximum to be, maybe you're dealing with youth, you can just make it 24. So between 18 and 24. So so once I enter, so once I start increasing, it will start from 18. Now another type of input field that we have is that is that about number. We also have type of password. And let me remove this minimum and maximum and step because it does not apply to password. So if I save now, we have the password. So the password, the only thing that is different is that you can enter anything, number or, but it's just that as I entering it, it will make it to be hidden, so that in case another person is looking at your system screen, they will not be able to keep track of what your password is. Now another type of input feed that we have is the dates, the type of dates, where you can, it will give you chance to, it will come up as a drop down and you can select dates, or maybe January or something like that, and just change months, change the dates, and even change the year, so as the case may be. So that is that about dates. Now we also have another type of input field. Of course, for dates too, you can set the minimum value. So you can set minimum value, maybe you want to set it to last year, so you can just say 2022, and that's January, and the date is maybe 23. If you save it now, if you come now and you try to pick, so you see the year will not go beyond 2022 because that's the minimum, and also the maximum too. You can also have set the maximum. Maybe you want to set it to the end of this year, depending on the application you are working on, and 31. So by the time you open this drop down and you want to select the dates, it will not go beyond 2023. So that is the max and minimum property. Of course, you can set required to, and you can also set a placeholder as you have been doing for the other input type. Another input type that we have is time. Apart from the fact that we can specify dates, we can also specify time. You can also specify time, and with this I can decide to remove this minimum and maximum. So this time too, if you open this drop down, you can select, okay, maybe 12:02. This is the minute, this is the hour, and you can set either AM or PM as the case may be, or just using, all these are done using only HTML. So another type that you have is the file, whereby you allow the user to select a file and upload it. So you can you can have a type of file. you can have a type. I welcome back to this section where I will continue talking to you about the different types of inputs feeds that we have, and we have been able to look at the type of date, the type of time, text, number, and so on and so forth. So moving forward now, we are going to look at the type file. We look at time the other time. Now we are going to look at file. That's if you want the user to upload a file. And don't forget that if you are taking a file in a form, don't forget to specify this property, which is the encryption type, and make sure it is multi-parts form data. So otherwise this file will not be posted to the server. So but that is not really of we are not paying attention to that aspect for now. So we have another type in input feed, which is called type file, and that is used to take file from your user. So if you save this now, you're going to be having this display, so where the user will have the chance or the privilege to open this. Once they click this, it will take them to the folder directory or file explorer, so that they can choose any file they wish to upload, as the case may be. So if the user selects, okay, the user selects maybe this particular picture, then it's going to be selected for them. Now one thing I want you to pay attention to in working with file is that you can choose the type of format of file that you want to accept, and with the property called accept. So let's say I just want to accept only PDF file, so I just say .pdf. If I save it now and I open this and let me just let me refresh this. Now if I choose this, if I open, you see that the only file that shows here is just the PDF file, because that input feed can only accept or open a PDF format. So if you want it to only accept PDF and maybe document, so you can decide to specify the type of document that you want to take, or the format type of document that you want to take. Okay, you want to take pictures too, you can put the JPG and so on and so forth. So with the accept property, you can specify the type of file that you want your inputs to take. Now, having done that, let's now move to the next input type, which is the select. And this select is just like a drop down, which give you permission or access to select one value from the name. So, and that is done using the tag select. And under this tag select, you're going to be specifying the options of the select form feed. Now, the label too applies for the input feed, where you specify, okay, maybe you specify this. Let's say you want user to choose their country, and you can just say label for, okay, sorry. So you have to specify the label, but it's up to you. So it's going to take a property called for, and I'm going to call this country, and this is not supposed to be here. So in between the label tag, I'm going to be specifying that I want user to enter their country. So just like we have been doing before, now you can specify some properties for this select input feed, and that is you can specify the ID, which I said it's advisable to make it to be the same with these four property of the previous label. And you can also specify the name, which is of importance when you post it to the server. You can also make it to be country, and you can also make it to be required that means you don't want the user to submit the form without choosing a particular option here. So let's say this first option is always like, okay, maybe it's void, like just to give that an idea of what the user an idea of what the drop down is all about. You can just tell them that maybe select your country, select your country. So from there you can then go to the second option by duplicating this using Alt Shift down arrow, and possibly the first one is maybe USA, and just duplicate and Canada, and you can just specify the last to be maybe South Africa, and you also specify the value. That means when the user selects USA, what should be the value that should be marked with that USA. You can decide to make it USA this time around and make it to be the same name. It does not have to be the same thing that the user is saying that is going to be passed as a value. So you can make this to be maybe South Africa, as the case may be. So if you save this now, you see that we have, okay, let me break this one more time so that we can see our elements properly. So you see that we have a drop down that is specifying, that is showing the option. This first option is what you can see here. Select your country. So if I open a drop down, I can see this drop down of that I've predefined or that I've programmed into the select feed. Now the next input feed that I want us to look at is the radio button. And this radio button is used to specify different options for the user, whereas the user is able to select one out of the several radio buttons that are possibly specified. So we are going to be wrapping this around the div 2, and as usual we are going to be having a label, and this time around the label is going to be, maybe let's say we want the user to enter let's say we want the user to let's say we want the user to enter their gender. So we are going to be specifying gender here. So gender of the user. So in there we are still, it's still going to be an input feed. It's just that the type will not be number, will not be text, will not be file. It's going to be type of radio. So where the user is able to select just one input, just one option out of the other listed uh, values. So ID, you need to specify the ID of this to maybe the ID of the first one is male, and the name is the name is gender, and the value for this first one is male. That means if the user select this first one, then they need to they need to the value that be attached to their entry or to their selection is going to be made. So you need to now specify what the, because if I save it now, you see that the user can only see a circle or something that they can choose or select or mark. But now you need to specify that option for the user to know that, okay, if I'm selecting that particular one, then I know that I am selecting male, my gender to be male. So you can put a full column here so that give the user, okay, when I select this, then I know that I'm selecting male. Now let's go for the second option, which we are still going to be repeating the same thing, but the only thing that make them to be uniform is that the name must be the same. We are still going to be defining an input feed here, which is also still going to be a type of radio, and you can make the ID, since you can make the ID this time around to be female, because you are going to be writing a label for female in the next line. Now you are going to have a name. The name must be the same so that we know that, okay, when you send a value, when you send the response to the server, then if the user pick female, then the value for female is going to be, sorry, the value for gender is going to be female, and if the user pick male, the value for gender is going to be male. So the name is what unites them together. So now the value this time around is going to be female. It's going to be female, and you can, just like we have been doing for the other input feeds, you can make it to be required. That's why, that means you don't want the user to be able to submit the form. You can make it to be required. You don't want the user to be able to submit the form without selecting one or more. So okay, I need to put the label. I just move this. The same thing applies, just some set of replications. So I just move this here, and instead of male, change it to female, and instead of male here to change it to female. Of course, I know that there might be other gender, but for this, let's just, for the sake of time, and let's just limit ourselves to these two genders, and just just to show you the basics of how these things works, and that's why we are trying to use practical examples. And if you try and select male now, if you select female, it's going to deselect male. So that's why radio button or radio input feed, we only take one selection at a time, and that is how this is how to work with that. An example of that is male, and in case there's another time where you need to use that, then you know that you should specify it as a radio button. Now moving forward, we have another, let me just duplicate this, so let's just wrap it around div. And the next form feed that we want us to look at this time around is going to be checkbox and radio input feed or input elements. They are almost the same thing. It's just that checkbox allow you to select multiple values. Checkbox allow you to select multiple values, unlike radio button where you can only select just one value. But checkbox, you can select more than one value. And let's see how fast we can go with that now. So label, let's make this label for maybe hobbies. So let's just call it hobbies, and I'll allow the user to, normally you are expected to have more than one hobby. So let's just make it hobbies. Of course, the user might have more than one or more hobbies. So depending on the user. So now we are going to be we are going to be taking this input feed from the user using the checkbox. And the same way we did, the same method we used for the radio button, we're going to be using the same method here. So, but in this time around, it's going to be a checkbox. And the ID here, this is the first checkbox, of course, this is the first one that we are using to specify to the user what they are expected to enter, or the value that we are expecting from them here. So but now the first option that we want to give them is that we want to give them the option of maybe music is their hobby, and you need to specify the name. Notice the difference between checkbox and radio button. Now in the case of radio button, you only write the name and you make it uniform, but in this case you will write the name, interest. For example, let's just make it hobbies, and you now put something like an array. Of course, when you start writing programming and not just markup language, you are going to get to understand array better. And if have idea of array, then you write a particular name, which can be the variable name that you want to use to collect the multiple options that user enter, and you need to write this square brackets after writing the variable name. So the value for this first one is music. The value for this first one is music, and I make this a self-closing tag. So I put a label after it, and the label will be music, so the so that the user will know that if I tick that first checkbox, it is going to be that I have selected the option of music. So if I save it, you see it's in action that this is a checkbox. Now if I want to duplicate, if I want to have other options for the user, I'll just duplicate this. The same rule apply. Now we are still working with the type of checkbox. The ID is this time around. Let's say we want the user to have option hobby of cooking, and so we make this to be cooking. Let's just make it cooking, and okay. So if I say, so the same thing up. So if I mark this now, so that I'm able to select multiple values or multiple response, and that's the difference between checkbox and radio button. Now, considering the last section of the type of input feed that we have in HTML form elements, we're going to be looking at the text area input feed. The text area input feed are just break so that I have some space, and I create div to house it. Then as usual, I create the label. Let me call this the bow. I want to take the biography of the user. So, and you know that biography is always more than a normal text. So I have this as my text area. Now this text area and input type of text, they are the same. It's just that the only difference is input type of text is input form element that has a type of text is expected to take a small number of characters, but for text area it's able to take large number of characters or words. So that's only different. So now, for example, if you want to enter names which is about 2 or 3 words, then you can use input type of text. But when you want to enter a long, maybe an essay, a short biography, and so on, then it's not right to use input type of inputs elements with a type of text. You should use text area. Now this, just like other input fields, we also input elements, we also have id that should be possibly be the same with the label for, and we also have name which is always used for the server side of the implementation. Let's call this the name to also be bow, and you can also have a placeholder. I believe you understand what the placeholder is. This enter your name is a placeholder. The words we show on the input feed before the user starts typing anything. You can also, let's say, maybe short biography. Let's just say enter your short bio, maybe a short biography, and you can make it required. And if we save now, you see that we have the text. Of course, you can choose to drag it, increase it, and enlarge it. But one thing that is right is user might not know that they can increase the size, but you can write a property that will increase the size using HTML, and that is by writing a property called rows. You can specify the rows to maybe to be 5. If you save it and you call off, you can increase it to 10. You can see that the higher the number of rows, the more the height of the text area, and the width is also always increased using columns or calls property, and you can specify the property in this case to be 30. If you are not good with 30, you can make it to be 50, but just that the columns or calls we increase the width, and that is that about text area. So the placeholder is not showing. So if I try and bring it here, okay, think, okay, that is saying that as like the value or the label. Let's just leave it. Now the last form element that we are going to consider is the button element, because after the user might have put some entries into the form space or form field that you have provided, there's need to do something with those information. Maybe they should submit it as the case may be, or submit it, or maybe reset it, or anything you want them to do with the form information, and that is going to be done using. So we also have the button. Let me also put this in a div so that we have it on a separate line. So the button is to maybe submit, and you can specify what you want this button to do. Is maybe you want the user to submit the information, and the button takes some property, and the property or attributes is that you can specify the type. Of course, any button that is inside a form element, automatically by default they are type of submit. So meaning that when the user, even if you don't specify this type to be submit, once the user click on it, it will trigger the submit action of the form. So you can also specify the name to be maybe submit, and you can also have a value for it. So value, it's just what the form reads. Now you have the form. So when you click on this form, then maybe these have entered their name, they have entered their email, they have selected their profile picture. Maybe you are working on a social media app and selected their country. Once they click submit, then it will post information to the server. Now we also have another type of form of button. Sorry, we also have another type of button. Let me just duplicate it first. Also have another type of button, and that is the reset button. For example, if the user have entered something and they just want to reset, their entries, then they will use you can specify this type to also be a type of reset. So reset, and you can make the name to be the same thing or make it something different, depends on you. You can also make the value to be reset. Now if you save it, let me just change call this reset. If you save it now, let's say you have some random values here, let's just say you have some random values. So pick some random value. So once you click on reset, so you just put some random value. So if you click on reset, it's going to take the form to its default state, and that is that about form field elements in HTML form.